Hello, SFL Nation. Welcome to the highly anticipated Season 16 schedule release show. I am your host, Gerald Giudice, and over the next couple of hours, we are going to break down the upcoming season of SFL football. Joining producer and commissioner of the SFL, Cameron Irvine, and myself are our three panelists. The first one is a Hall of Famer. You know him as Eddie Gage. Eddie, how are you this evening?
What up, though, SFL Nation? Glad to be here. Can't wait to break this all down. Let's do it.
Second, you know him as the tight end for the Fort Worth Toros, number 44, Robert Garrett Jr. How are you this morning, RG? Or this evening, RG? How are you?
I am awesome, Gerald. I'm very excited to be here. This is my third straight season helping out with the schedule release show. And every season, it's like Christmas came early.
And third, and my final panelist, commentator, play-by-play extraordinaire for the SFL minor league, who I've had a chance to work with a couple times, Tyler Falk. Tyler, how are you this evening?
Gerald, it's a honor and a privilege to be on the show with all of you. One of these panelists don't belong. We have two fantastic SFL players, and I'm just from the SFLM, so I'm very excited to be here.
All right, well, since you got the introductions out the way, let's get right into opening week. Week 1 schedule coming up. There you see the games. We'll start with Eddie. What game are you looking forward to in week 1?
Gerald, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to just get right into it and tell you the game I look forward the most is going to be a rematch of two teams who played each other twice last season, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs, and that's going to be Louisiana traveling to Vancouver. These teams played twice last season. Both were in Louisiana. Gerald, returning from suspension, is going to be returning to the coaching staff. Louisiana looking to continue status quo. Will they be able to open up this passing game? And as it was the demise of their team's playoff exit last season, will they open up the playbook and give Johnny more control, or should they continue to feed the beast, Registry, the presumed MVP of this last season? We shall see.
Hey, RG, you are up next. What game are you looking forward to?
I think out of the games on this list, the one that catches my eye the most is Denver at Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls back-to-back seasons where they were there, but they just couldn't quite get it. I think they're going to be coming out and trying to swing red hot, but Denver and Jeremy Vega, never an easy task. So it's going to be interesting to watch those two teams go up real early in the season.
And to round out our panelists, Tyler, who do you have in the week 1 as your game of the week?
Gerald, I couldn't choose between these two, and they're both for the exact same reason. The two new expansion franchises, San Diego and DC. I'm looking forward to see what both teams bring to the table on their opening week. San Diego will go away and play Los Angeles, which should be a quick forming rivalry with the battle in the Bay Area, whereas DC and London will be the battle for the capital, the English capital and the capital of the United States of America. So both of those two should be really fun to watch.
Awesome. Let's go now. We start with week 1. Let's go to week 12. This is going to be an interesting thing. As you can notice, all of these are divisional games. So playoffs could be decided in this week. Let's go to RG first. Who do you like in this week 12 matchup?
I think week 12 is set up to be awesome. And as the season goes on, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tiebreakers broken in this week. But the one that stands out to me, and I think it's obvious to most, would be Vice Wars. Las Vegas at Denver. Those two teams always bring it when they go up against each other. So I'm excited.
Yeah, Las Vegas, Denver, Vice Wars with possibly a playoff berth on the line. I think that's going to be a great choice. Tyler, your choice for week 12.
For me, we have to go out east. And for me, I think the Week 12 must-see will be Atlanta and Louisiana, just because of the strength of schedule that both the teams have coming into this season. That will be definitely, I think, one of those teams will make the playoffs. One of those teams won't.
And finally, Hall of Famer Eddie Gage. Who do you like in Week 12?
Gerald, Houston, Mexico City, Fort Worth, and Lone Star are all in the division in which 3 of those teams made the playoffs. Fort Worth just missed out, but probably about a game, maybe 2. These 4 teams are going to be battling each other all season long, beating each other up. And unfortunately, I think you're going to have some good teams not make the playoffs. And Week 12 could come down to just that to decide who of these teams make it and which one goes home.
Excellent from my panelists once again. All right, now we're going to just go with the 4 of us actually have looked over the schedule. And which is your top game that you can't wait for through weeks 1 through 12? It could be a Week 12 game, it could be a Week 1 game, or anywhere in between. Tyler, you're up.
Yeah, for me, the top game of the season for me would be in Week 11 when Queen City goes to Lone Star to take on the Glory. That, for me, is going to be must-see TV because I think one of those teams is going to be looking for a playoff berth and a win. I should say both those teams will be looking for a playoff berth. One of those teams will end up taking it. Will Lone Star get back into the playoffs, or will Queen City finally return? I think that matchup decides it all.
Okay, Eddie, who's your game of the year?
Gerald, it was hard to pick, but if I had to pick one, there's actually a couple of them, but you're only going to make me pick one. I'm going to go, it's going to be Week 1, Louisiana facing off against the Swarm.
Okay, and RG, who do you got?
Well, I'm going to break the rules just a little bit here, and I'm actually going to give you 2. The first one, going to sum up very quickly, but Fort Worth going into Louisiana in Week 2, big matchup, heartbreaker for Louisiana the last time the 2 teams played. And then the one that's not a homer and I'm not a part of would be Carolina at Florida late in the season. Looks like Week 10. Neither of these teams, as far as I know, have played before in their history. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they come at each other with.
Great game to pick. My pick is Week 2, Sioux Falls traveling to Baltimore. The SFL Championship rematch. I think that's just going to be a fantastic game. Sioux Falls just falling short once again, as we said earlier. And I think it's going to be the great game of Week 2. Speaking of the schedule, we couldn't have this schedule without our commissioner, Cameron Irvine. Cam, how are you this evening?
I'm very good, Gerald. The natives are getting restless, wanting to see more games. Love the energy and excitement.
They're like kids at Christmas time. Just hold on here. Let the parents have their coffee first here, and we're going. It's a couple questions for Cam. Just talking about the schedule. What matchup can't you wait for, and what was it like putting the schedule together?
Well, first, I really want to hear on a scale of 1 to 10 how much Eddie hates me for putting him at Baltimore opening week.
Cam, I've notoriously told you that I want the best, and in order to make myself become a better coach, a better player, a better owner, I need to learn how to beat the best. So, sure enough, you go and follow my lead and put me up in there against the world champs in their hometown. But hey, like I said, in order to get where I want to be, I got to beat the best. And so here it is. I asked for it. Ask and you shall receive, Cam.
All right. Well, not as bad as I thought it was. I thought he was going to try to climb through the computer screen, Gerald, and get after me. But Arizona-Baltimore should be great. Arizona getting bounced by Baltimore. They had a chance to make the playoffs. Baltimore kind of took that away from them and then went on a run. Can Arizona get their revenge, spoil Baltimore's banner-raising night? But other than that, Gerald, a week one look that I have is, as mentioned earlier, that London DC game. Not only is it the battle for the capital, as Tyler aptly named it, but it's also Knights and Dragons. Can the Knights slay the Dragons in DC's return to the SFL? That's going to be a lot of fun. And we've got some new teams on either coastline in this league, and a couple of them will be making their home debuts. So really excited about those matchups.
And the other question that I have for you is, can you believe with this league coming that we have 24 teams? Amazing.
Yeah, say that one more time, Gerald. I apologize.
24 teams. Can you believe that we have 24 teams in this league?
Yeah, it's incredible. Putting together the schedule, now 144 regular season games, and just seeing it all come together was just amazing to look at. It's a lot of games, it's a lot of players, and a lot of passion in this league. And I think this is the best schedule yet. I love its balance, and I love that this league is so competitive from top to bottom. It makes putting together a schedule difficult, but at the same time, it also makes it easy because you know that anybody can beat anybody.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would not have wanted the job of having to put this together. Great job from Cam, as always. And I see you guys in the chat are ready to go. So let's start with the Atlantic Division. Tyler, let's go through the Atlantic. Let's start off with the teams with Carolina and Charleston.
Yeah, so Carolina are going to open up their schedule against Las Vegas on the road and then travel to face Los Angeles, the first time as Los Angeles. For me, when I was going through this schedule, I had to stop and look at that middle third. They're going to start on the road against Charleston, one of the two games that they'll play against Charleston this season, and then they're going to come home and play Jacksonville. After that, they're going to go and play Queen City, who are notorious for playing very well at home, and then it doesn't get better for them in that little road stretch where they have to go to the defending champs in Baltimore the very next week. For me, that's going to be their toughest stretch, and we'll see whether or not Carolina are up for the challenge in that regard. Some matchups to watch here for Carolina. They're going to play Charleston twice, so week 5 and then week 12. That could easily be for a playoff spot, in my opinion. And then you have that Florida game in week 10. They need to finish strong, in my opinion. If they can pick off one or two of those games in the middle section and then go to Florida and beat Florida, they're almost, in my opinion, a shoo-in to make the playoffs this year. I think the biggest challenge for Carolina is, can they limit the turnovers? The teams they're facing this season combined have a average of a +1 in the take give. So the defenses that they're going to face are going to be pretty tough. But they do have a very easy home schedule. There's the 20th ranked in terms of overall strength of schedule. So if they can win their home games, pick off a few on the road, they should be in the playoffs. We go over to Charleston. And for Charleston, instead of it being the middle section of games for them, it's their opening couple of weeks where they're going to open up against Mexico City. Then they play Arizona. Then they go away to Sioux Falls and then come home to DC. That section, again, it's mostly home games, but for me, we're really going to be able to tell what kind of Charleston Predator team we have this season by those first 4 games. Are they able to beat quality opponents at home? And how are they going to fare against opposite ends of the spectrum in Sioux Falls and DC? As far as a couple matchups to watch for these guys, Carolina, again, week 5 and week 12. And then I think the game of the season, the pivotal game for them, will be Atlanta in week 6. Atlanta will be kind of a wild card, I think, this season, and if they can take that one at home, they should have a very promising season. A challenge for them is, I wouldn't say they don't have too many challenges, but the Predators had a fantastic defense last season, and 3 out of the 5 playoff teams they will face this season will be on the road. So playoff teams being Sioux Falls, Vancouver, and Jacksonville. So those will be games to watch and games they will need to win it, or if they want to be successful this season. We go to Florida, the Storm. Taking a look at their schedule, again, that opening couple games for them will be tough. They're going to play Lone Star away to start out, then they come home and play Jacksonville. They go away and play Houston, then they come home against Las Vegas. The opening half, matter of fact, is going to be tough for them, as you see there on your screen. You have Mexico City and Sioux Falls week 5 and 6. It's going to be very tough for Florida to get some wins in the opening half, and they're going to need to find some wins if they want to make a run for the playoffs this season. Some matchups to watch, like I mentioned, week 1 against Lone Star, week 6 against Sioux Falls, and then a very pivotal Jacksonville game in week 12. For me, are the 3 games to watch for them. The biggest challenge for Florida is that Ron Cochran has thrown 30-plus interceptions in 2 straight years. The only difference between those 2 years, they will not have Optimus Klein in the receiving corps. They also have the toughest schedule in the division. For me, Gerald, I can only think of a few words. Help me. Help me. They're going to need some help in order to get in the playoffs, I think, this season. Jacksonville, the final team in the Atlantic Division. Looking at their schedule, there's a 3-game road trip that I think is going to be very pivotal for Jacksonville. It's week 2 through week 4 where they're going to go away to Florida, away to San Diego, and then away against Lone Star. Again, San Diego being that expansion franchise, we don't know what to expect from them. It could prove to be a thorn in their side, or it could prove that it's just going to come out daisies for them. As far as matchups to watch for them, week 4 against Lone Star, week 7 and 11 against Vancouver will be, again, quality games and exciting games for us all to enjoy. They have the easiest road schedule in the division at 18th in terms of schedule difficulty, and they also have a fairly easy home schedule. So in my opinion, this is Jacksonville's division to lose. And that's all I got for the Atlantic Division, Gerald.
Thank you for that, Tyler. Now let's go to the East with Robert Garrett Jr. Robert, let's go to the East. What do you got?
Alrighty, we will kick it off with the Atlanta Swarm first, and their schedule is not by far, it's pretty close, but is the toughest in the East Division. Got a lot of away games late, which is going to be really tough for them to. They got to get started strong, is what I'm trying to say. But the last 3 games of the season, away at St. Louis and week 12 at Louisiana, 2 pivotal East Division matchups with Arizona in the middle there. And we know Eddie Gage and his defense is always ready for the challenge. Atlanta got to start out strong against Tulsa and then bring in Vancouver, and really a rematch of that game that was very crazy between the 2 of them. And next for the East Division, we will move on to the Louisiana Revolution. And the Revolution also up there in terms of strength of schedule at a 542. Pretty evenly spaced out in their home and away games. They won't have to spend a whole lot of time on the road or at home, 2 weeks being the most that they see of either in a row. But Louisiana, again, they got to start off strong. At Vancouver to start, and then you host Fort Worth, host St. Louis, and that's always a big matchup too. You know, Johnny Pickler and St. Louis have their little history behind them and a bit of a rivalry growing there. So it'll be a big matchup. And then you got the Week 8 and Week 9 and Week 10, where you have Arizona and Sioux Falls at home, and then you got to travel to Denver, one of the two matchups they have with Denver in the season. And it's going to be a big one as you get later on in the season. You're fighting for everything you can get. Now to move on to St. Louis, and this is one of the more interesting schedules to me. The lowest in the division when it comes to strength of schedule, but it's really not much easier than the other two. It just looks a little different. They get a 3-game home stretch weeks 9 through 11, hosting Tulsa, Atlanta, and Las Vegas. But big matchups for them early as they got to go to Louisiana week 3, and they host the Vancouver Legion in week 4. Another interesting matchup. You got the the barbecue matchup, St. Louis versus Fish and Chips. Yep. Week 6, home against London. And, you know, those two teams always bring it when they face each other. Always quite an interesting matchup to watch. The last team in the East Division is the Tulsa Desperados. Sat at 3-9 at the end of the season. You know, they're fighting to find their spot, and this is a pretty good schedule for them to try and get out there. You know, they start at Atlanta to start off their season, and that's going to be a tough way to kick it off. But then they get to go into Portland, who struggled in their inaugural season in the SFL. So a chance to gain a little bit of footing. And then you got to go to Fort Worth. But the next 2 games, home against Queen City and Sioux Falls, those are going to be huge matchups for the Desperados. If they can start off their Week 5 stretch solid, then I think they have a very good fighting chance. DC, you don't know what you're going to get quite yet. Destro has some history in the league and knows his coaching, but we don't know what the build of the team's going to look like. And then they got 2 matchups with St. Louis, Week 9 and Week 12. And I personally feel that between the two teams, whichever can come away with both wins, I think has a chance to make the playoffs. Not necessarily win the division, because you still have Atlanta and Louisiana, but I think both these teams are set in a position that they could get one of those last 6 spots.
Okay, thank you, Robert Garrett Jr. Now, let's go with Eddie Gage, and we're going to go to the north. Eddie, where's yours?
Baltimore, let's start there. I mean, they are the defending champions. It's been a long time coming, and they've gotten close so many times. Found a way, hit their stride toward the end of the season. Got red hot and beat some impressive teams along the way to win the championship. I mean, they shut down Sioux Falls' running game, although I think they kind of shot them own selves in the foot with not enough attempts. But they did the job. They went on the road and got a couple of tough victories. And now here they are to start the season against yours truly. And I can tell you myself, we're going to be ready. I'm sure they're going to be ready. And as Cam said, it's going to be banner night. So I know they're going to be fired up. They're going to be looking to show their fans that they're still here to compete for back-to-back champions. And it's going to be a great game. In week 2, they remain home, playing Sioux Falls, the team they just beat in the championship. And I'm sure that they're already telling themselves, we're either going to allow Judy and Tyree to open up the ball more, or we're going to do what we didn't do in the championship game and feed Colin Hart in his running game a bit more. He was productive in that game, but he just didn't have enough opportunities. Sioux Falls could not catch up, and they end up losing a heartbreaker. In week 3, I mean, I know I'm going in sequence here, but they got a tough slate here to start the season. They're playing Jeremy and the defending champs from season 13. I mean, he's upset. They had a tough loss in which they lost Giacomo Jones. I believe it was the first quarter of that game in the playoffs, so he's looking to rebound and get back to his winning ways. They have they got a lot of road games here. I mean, a lot of home games here early on, playing London in week 4 and Queen City in week 5. Queen City is looking to rebound. They had a tough season last season when they couldn't get their run game going. I'm certain they're going to look to get that run game going this season with 3 of the offensive linemen returning. They had 4 last season. In week 6, Vancouver, their defense played outstanding last season. In fact, I think it was the best season as a team as of yet with Andy and company. So I'm sure they're looking to rebound. Atlanta just barely got in the playoffs. I mean, you can see this Baltimore schedule. It is tough. Atlanta in week 7, they're going to travel to Atlanta. They lost a heartbreaker to them in week 1 of last season in the back and forth affair, in which neither team could stop the opposing quarterback. Brian Dynasty looking to be the MVP. We'll see how that shapes out. Week 8, Carolina. They're my dark horse to make the playoffs this season. And they got a rematch with Queen City in week 9. Lone Star, surprise team from last season. I mean, look, you just go up and down this lineup. They got one of the tougher schedules in the SFL, in my opinion. Week 11, they tend to have Mexico City's number. Who knows? I mean, word through the grapevine is they got someone potentially coming back that is going to shake up their roster and give them another weapon for this offense. And in week 12, they wrap up against DC. DC, I'm not sure what they're gonna do. They're a dark horse right now. No one knows. They did win the championship in their last season, defeating Santa Fe, who is now Mexico City, in the championship game. I think it was like 34-31, something like that. We do know Stephen Mullinex is gonna be their OC. What we don't know is who's gonna be their defense and what this roster is gonna look like. Stay tuned for that. Moving on, we'll go to DC. As I just stated, I don't know what they're going to do. No one knows. No one knows what the staff looks like. All we know is that they have Stephen Mullinex calling the offense, so, there's some familiarity there. But as far as the defense, they don't have a coordinator in place yet. Destro is on record saying he's going to be the Jerry Jones of the SFL. He's going to sit back and let everyone do their respective jobs. We'll see how they shape out. They do have some tough games. They got Denver at home in week 2. On the road in week 2. Mexico City, another playoff team. Charleston looking to rebound from last season's woes. St. Louis is on the rise. They can get their offense together and find a quarterback in their replacement. They should be okay. They got Lone Star, another playoff team in week 7. So Cam didn't do DC any favors either. So I can't complain because they got a pretty tough schedule too. They got a 3-time champion in Florida at home in week 8. Houston, one of his best friends in week 11. There's going to be no love lost that week. I can guarantee you that. They won't be calling each other until after game day. And they're going to finish the season in week 12 versus the defending champion Baltimore at home. Moving on, we go into London. London has one of the biggest staffs in the entire SFL. They have the owner, Liam. They got the team president, Angus McLean. Director of Football Operations and Defensive Coordinator Tanner Hendricks. GM Chad Rowland. Dustin Zeck is the head coach and OC. Benji Matson, he's the Director of Communications, and they round that out with Jeff Gagne. He's a digital content advisor. So they have everything covered. Everyone's able to do their jobs. No one should fall behind schedule. And looking at their schedule, they, as you stated, they start with DC. I mean, so it's going to be them facing off against a team that no one knows much about. Who knows how that's going to shape out? Then they get Mexico City at home in week 2. They seem to make the playoffs every darn season. In week 3, they play us at home. We're looking to get some revenge. We lost our tailback, DJ Moses, the second, and the second half of that game. We're looking to rebound and send him home with an L. Thank you very much. Week 4, the defending champions on the road. That's going to be a tough one. So, and then they follow that up with another tough one at home versus Lone Star. They play one of their friends here in week 6 in St. Louis in the Fish and Chips Bowl, I believe it's called. Follow with Sioux Falls in week 7. Put your pads on. That's going to be a tough one, as Colin Hart and Company is going to be looking to smash them and send them to the Shadow Realm over and over again. Week 8, Tulsa on the road, as Cam calls, one of the most exciting defenses in the entire SFL. We shall see. Arizona has something to say about that. Week 9, they play against DC once again, so there'll be a rematch. Someone's going to be looking to take revenge from that loss they received early in the season. Followed by Houston on the road. It's going to be hot and humid over there. Make sure you drink plenty of water. Fort Worth on the road as well. Another hot and humid one. My goodness, Cam. Bring your Gatorade with you. and they follow it up with Queen City, who's looking to rebound from last season. Moving forward, we're going to go on to our next matchup here in the North Division in Queen City. Queen City, they lost Steven and Nacho, and Lewis to Fort Worth last season. And with that, you just wonder how much coaching they were doing or how much they've learned and took with them, because they had a disappointing season last season. You know, they lost those 2 personnel. But when Steven left, everyone thought that they would just pick right up where they left off when they picked up Deezer Powell in free agency. Things didn't quite work out, although he did have an individual impressive season with yards and touchdowns. They're looking to right away in week 1, revenge that loss. I'm going on record right now to call that the teacher versus student matchup, with the ownership and GM of Queen City going up against Steven and Lewis. Week 2, they're going on the road to face St. Louis, followed up with a game at home versus Atlanta. Mark Chisholm, you know, he's looking to show them, hey, you taught me a lot. I appreciate that, but I'm going to have to give you an L and send you back home. We shall see. Followed up in week 5, they go on the road versus Baltimore. And then by week 6, perhaps LA has an identity and they'll have a game plan together for Tom Rahman and company. Sully Richardson, he is one of the most unheralded, unappreciated, unknown defensive coordinators in all the SFL. I think that guy should get some kind of respect, and hopefully this season he can earn it. Week 7, they go to Carolina. Carolina, their offense picked up mid-season once they changed coordinators and Harry stepped down and Heath stepped in. That's going to be a good one. Can Carolina pick it up with their defense after they lose Sully? We shall see. Week 8, they go on the road to face Jacksonville. Depending on kind of quarterback you get that day in Christian Christensen. We'll see how that one shapes out. Followed up by yet another matchup with defending champions. Wow, Cam. 2 games versus defending champions. No love lost there. They're going to follow it up with a game at home with DC. And by then, they should have an identity, some kind of identity on DC's offense and defense as well. Week 11, they go on the road to Lone Star, and they finish that up the season on the road versus London. So a bunch of interesting matchups here. We have to see how it all shapes out here in the North. It's going to be very competitive. I think Baltimore's going to lead the pack, and everyone else going to be fighting for that number 2 seed. But hey, that's why they play the games. Well, we shall see.
Hey, thank you for that. And if you love the voice of Eddie Gage, you're going to listen to him some more. Let's go to the West. And the 2 teams that Eddie has are Arizona and Sioux Falls. Let's start with Arizona first.
You would give me my own team, but I shall take it. As I told Cam earlier, I mean, come on, Cam. You give us the defending champs on the road on banner night when they're sitting there putting on their championship rings on their fingers and the crowd's going crazy. But hey, to be the best, you got to beat the best, and we take that challenge with pride. Week 2, we were 3-1 going into the season, going into this game, and Charleston surprised us with a 16-10 victory at our house. We're looking for revenge, and we're gonna go on the road and get it. You caught it here first. You heard it here first. We're going on the road in Charleston in week 2, and we're gonna walk away with that W. Week 3, another loss we took when DJ Moses got hurt. Our offense just collapsed, but we're gonna go on the road and get that win as well. Thank you very much. Week 4, oh my goodness. Denver in that play action passing game. Gonna be a tough one, but we shall see how it goes. I know he's gonna want to revenge this season after falling short of his expectations to make the playoffs, but we'll see how it goes. Vice Wars. That's what Denver and Vegas play, but hey, I gotta figure out a title for us when we play Las Vegas. I mean, they're right up the road. They're about a 4-hour drive away from headquarters. I got to talk to their owner and see if I can get something going in that regard. Week 6, we're going against Portland. Good friends of mine up there. No love lost, and nothing but respect for their organization and the guys up top there. Week 7, we at home in a revenge matchup. I mean, we're playing 7 teams we played last season, and this Winter 21 schedule. So we'll see how it all shapes out. We had a tough game versus Fort Worth, but I'm just looking for yet again another tough matchup with that running game of theirs. Week 8, On the road, Gerald coming back to coaching staff. I know Reggie Street is going to be all warmed up by then. He's probably going to have about 9 animations. We're going to have to put our hard hats on for that game. And I'm looking forward to it. Week 11, at home versus the Swarm. They beat us in season 14. In season 14. We beat them in season 15. So this is going to be a tiebreaker. And week 12, I know Sioux Falls is going to be looking forward to getting revenge against that week 11 loss they took versus us last season. I can't wait, and it's going to be an exciting time. Let's get it started.
All right, Eddie, give me Sioux Falls.
Sioux Falls. Talk about a team who has redemption on their minds. They've gotten to the final championship game 2 seasons in a row, and 2 seasons in a row they fell just short. And both games, I don't know if everyone noticed, but I noticed, for whatever reason, Colin Hart did not get the ball enough, and I feel that if they had fed him a bit more in both of those games may have came out with different results. But that's the past. Sioux Falls is looking forward to the present, and they started off versus Jared and that Denver play action offense. One of the most difficult strategies in the SFL to defend because they do so many things. Although they keep their playbook simple, Denver's going to be a tough one. Followed up by week 2, they're going on the road to play the defending champs, looking for some kind of revenge, and that's probably going to be the game of the week in my opinion. They go on to Mexico City at home. That's going to be a good one. As I said, there's some surprises in store with that offense of Mexico City, and I can't wait to see Ramos and company unleash hell in week 4. Week 6, they play the 3-time champion Florida Storm in what's going to be, in my opinion, probably a back and forth affair in which both teams are going to struggle to get to the 20s. Looking at those stylistic matchups, although Florida did get some changes in their coaching staff this season, so I just have to see how that plays out. But Griffin King, he's moving over from Queen City. He's not going to be their offensive coordinator, so we have to see how that shapes out. They have a tough game in week 8 at home versus Lone Star, in which 2 teams who play similar styles. Lone Star played them last season. This is going to be a rematch. Followed by week 9 on the road versus Sioux Falls. I mean, 2 hard-hitting teams they're playing back-to-back against. That's going to be very interesting, and both teams are going to leave that game very sore and going straight to the hot tub. Week 11, the defending champs, they play in Denver once again. So, yeah, Cam is spreading the love around with these tough matchups. He doesn't mind just giving all these teams the business in terms of these schedules. And he followed it up in week 12 versus us. So, a lot of exciting games here in the West. I think it's one of the more toughest divisions in the SFL, along with the East, and it's going to be a great season.
Okay, and I'm going to take the last 2 teams, West. Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to start with Denver. Denver starting the season, the first 3 weeks. In between, they got DC. They have both title teams from season 15. They start at Sioux Falls, and then they got Baltimore at home. And then you have a horrible streak. 5 of the next 6 on the road. They go to Arizona. They go to Louisiana in one of 2 matchups with Louisiana. Then they're home at Houston. And then they go to San Diego, Portland, and Atlanta. Then they get Louisiana for the 2nd time at home. I'm looking forward to that matchup, as you have one of the best rushing defenses in Denver, only allowing 52.5 yards a game, going up against Reggie Streeter and that vaunted running game, averaging 180 plus per game. Then they have the Sioux Falls and then Vice Wars in week 12. The keys for Denver, in my opinion, is they got to get their wins on the road. They have the 16th easiest road win percentage. They have to take advantage of that. They're going to have to take advantage of maybe DC and Portland in week 8. They're going to have to, by that time, I think San Diego might be a pretty good team. So it's going to be interesting to see how Denver handles the early part of that schedule, especially that 5-game road trip. Now let's flip to Vegas. Vegas, having the middle of the road schedule here, they start off with Carolina, and then they travel to the Mavericks. The big thing with Vegas is they have 3 games on the road. As you see, San Diego, Florida, and Arizona on the road with Los Angeles, the Lycans in between there. Then they host Louisiana. And they go San Diego, then Fort Worth on the road. 2 tough home games against Arizona and Sioux Falls. And they finish up with St. Louis and then Vice Wars on the road. The middle of the road schedule, I think, is going to be the toughest for them. And they're playing St. Louis, they're playing Sioux Falls and Louisiana, both 9-3 teams, but they got both of those games at home. Las Vegas is playing 4 playoff teams from last year. They have 2 at home and 2 away. And getting back to Denver, Denver's playing 7 playoff teams. So I think that's a big factor in what's going to be, I think, a great Western division. All right, so now we're at the West. We might as well go to the Pacific. Tyler, what do you have in the Pacific?
Well, let's start off with the Los Angeles Lycans, the team that has replaced the Chicago Wildcats. For Los Angeles, they're going to start with an opener against one of the expansion franchises in San Diego. And then they're going to go to Carolina. And then eventually, for me, the toughest part of their schedule is going to be weeks 4 through week 9. You're going to play Houston at home, Vancouver at home, go to Queen City, come back home against Charleston, and then you're going to finish off that stretch at Atlanta. And then come home against Jacksonville. So that little section there will tell us whether or not Los Angeles is going to shake off the rust from that 7 straight losses they suffered last season. If they're just going to put it right behind them and move forward from it, that stretch will tell us how they're going to fare. Some matchups to watch here for Los Angeles. Week 3 against No, that's wrong one. There we go. Week 1 against San Diego. Like I mentioned it before, it'll be the Battle of the Bay Areas. Week 4 versus Houston, and then Week 9 versus Jacksonville. Those 3 games will be good litmus tests for Los Angeles to see where they're at as a franchise. They're going to have the 4th hardest home schedule, but to counter that, they have the easiest away schedule. If I looked at it right, there's no team check that. They're going to have Vancouver, which is an above 500 team, but as far as difficulty goes, they're going to have the easiest away schedule. Moving on to the Portland Fleet, a year now removed from their inaugural season. How will they shape up here in season 16? They're going to start off at home against St. Louis. Moving forward from there, we'll skip all the way to week 5, which begins what I think is their toughest part of the schedule, week 5 through week 9. They're going to start that little stretch at San Diego. We don't know what to expect yet from San Diego, but expect Optimus Klein and the rest of the front office in San Diego to put a great team together. And then they're going to come home, play Arizona, Eddie Gage's team. Then they're going to stay at home and play Denver. Always a tough team to play, and they're never easy, especially when they're on the road. Then they're going to go away and play Houston and Carolina to finish up that little stretch. Again, Portland, they're looking to move past 2-10 from last season and develop their players and move forward. This will be an interesting test to see whether or not they can do that. They have the easiest schedule in the division. If they can win one of the 2 games they play against playoff teams, they should be in good shape. 2 of the playoff teams that they're going to face this season are going to be on the road. That's going to be Vancouver and Houston. Moving on to the second of the expansion franchises in the San Diego Mavericks. Week 1 is going to be must-watch TV, in my opinion, when they're going to play Los Angeles. Moving on from that opening game, the toughest spot for San Diego for me will be weeks 8 through 11. That starts with Denver at home, away at Charleston, home against Vancouver, and then home against Florida. You're going to notice a trend here. All the playoff teams they face this season will be at home. So that should give San Diego fans some confidence and some optimism going into the rest of the season. Some games to watch. Again, you can't miss a franchise game opener in Week 1 versus LA. Week 3 against Jacksonville, we'll see the development is in San Diego, see what the coaching staff has developed. And then Week 8 versus Denver, that's going to be the toughest game all season for them, I believe. And that'll be a good litmus test to see whether or not they're going to make it as far as I think they're going to make it. And then last but not least, the Vancouver Legion. In my opinion, this division is Vancouver's to lose. Their toughest stretch will be Week 6 through Week 9 when they play Jacksonville away to start. They're going to come home, play Charleston, and then away at Florida and San Diego to finish that stretch out. If they can win at least 2 of those games, they should be in a good chance of getting back to the playoffs. Moving on to matchups that I think will be interesting for them. Week 1 versus Louisiana. That's going to be a good litmus test to see what changes they made over the offseason, what they're looking to do in Season 16. Week 6 versus Baltimore is one that I have circled on my calendar, and you should too. In fact, the next game, Week 7 against Jacksonville away, another fantastic matchup. That middle of the season will be a tough test for Vancouver, and it's a good place to see how Vancouver will fare this season. We're just going to have to see how much of the core will stick around. Vancouver has historically not had a whole lot of turnover during the off seasons, so we'll see if they can keep everyone together this season.
Okay, thank you for the Pacific and going to Vancouver. I think Vancouver is going to be struggling there, trying to replace one Rich Pratchard, who left us way too soon last season. So shout out to all the people that miss and love Rich Pratchard, number 86, fond in our hearts. Let's go now to the last division. I call it the Tex-Mex division, and it's the South. Robert Garrett Jr., what do you got?
Well, I think the place to start off in the South is with my very own Fort Worth Toros. So we're going to go ahead and start off there. And when it comes to strength of schedule, we actually have the second worst in the league, just behind the St. Louis Gladiators, who are at .403, where the Toros are at .410. So to kick off the season, back-to-back away games, one at Queen City and one at Louisiana. We played Queen City last season in season 15, and we're able to pull out the win there. But I imagine Queen City's going to look a little bit different, as I believe it was Eddie mentioned. The offensive coordinator went out to Florida to help out with the Storm. So got to imagine that Queen City is going to go back looking like they were maybe in season 13 and 14, with, as far as we know, Eric taking the offense back over. And then Louisiana, the Toros showed that they could win at Louisiana, but you also got to think that they're coming for blood. Upsetting loss for Louisiana, and they're going to try to make that right. Then you got week 3 home against Tulsa, a team that we have not played yet, and I think it's going to be an exciting one with the defense that they have versus the offense that we look to have. A rematch against Portland, both teams season 15 expansion teams, and Portland looked to get better as the season went on this last season. So I imagine that by week 4 they might have an identity, have some things figured out, and that should be a good game. Then you get the first of 2 games against Houston in week 5, and Houston was a team that, just like We had a couple upsets. They also pulled off a last-minute win against us off of a non-contract running back taking it into the end zone. So one that we have not forgotten. Then starts off week 6 against San Diego. You don't know what they're going to look like quite yet, but with Javier Vasquez at the helm and the coaching staff that they have over there, I believe that they are going to look pretty good by week 6 and be getting on the right foot to start off their expansion franchise. Week 7 away at Arizona. Eddie, I have not forgotten the loss we took from you last season. So, I mean, just like you were saying earlier, we're coming. We're ready for revenge, and I'm looking forward to it. Then you get a 4-week home stretch for Fort Worth, home against Vegas, then Houston, Mexico City, and London. I'm looking forward to that Week 11 matchup against London, as it is the first time that myself and Jason Williams will get to face off against our former team, and it should be a fun one. Then close out the season Week 12 at Lone Star. A big rivalry between us and Lone Star. Not quite able to get a win last season in 2 matchups, so looking to get our first one here. And Gerald, when it comes to tight ends in the SFL, you get no better than the South Division. 3 of season 15's best tight ends playing in the one division.
I couldn't agree with you more. I am going to take the next 2 teams. Let's start my first of the 2 teams with the Houston Hyenas, a team that was just on the brink of the playoffs last year, just like 1 game away. They start off with the Jacksonville Kings on the road, and a couple games against more playoff teams at Lone Star and Florida. Then they're on the road to LA. 1 of 2 games against RG's Fort Worth Toros. Then they have a road game against Denver. Then they face Louisiana. So the first 6-7 games are going to be tough. Then they go to the Portland Fleet in the second game for Fort Worth. Then they travel to London, DC, and then they finish off the season with Mexico City. If you are Houston, you have to keep your advantage that you have against the division. The last 4 seasons 12 through 15, Houston against their division opponents, 17-8, including 12-2 at home. So that's going to be the key for Houston to be a contender in this division. Now we're going to go to the Lone Star Glory, and the Lone Star Glory have one of the hardest road schedules in the league. They start off with the Florida Storm, and then 4 of the next 5 are on the road. Houston, Carolina, then they host Jacksonville, and then they go to London and then Mexico City for their international road trip. Then they got DC, and here is where their schedule is going. I think it's going to make or break the Lone Star Glory season. They only got their second game against Mexico City at home, sandwiched in between the SFL season 15 finalists on the road, Sioux Falls and Baltimore. Those are the 3 games I think that the Lone Star Glory need to have at least 2 wins to possibly make the playoffs, and they finish up with 2 games at home against Queen City and Fort Worth. Lone Star, if their defense can really hold up against some decent running teams, and like RG said, some of the best tight ends in the league that's in this division, I think they're going to be okay. They also play 7 playoff teams. one of only 5 teams that has that distinction, along with Denver, Florida, Louisiana, and Sioux Falls. So that's my take on the Lone Star Glory and the Houston Hyenas. We're going to finish off, last but not least. RG, tell us about Mexico City.
All right, to break down Mexico City's schedule, it is not an easy start for them at all. 4 of the first 5 games on the road. The first one, week 1 at Charleston. Charleston had some struggles last season, ending at 5-7, but this team to be a defensive powerhouse, and I can't imagine that they don't get their feet up underneath them soon. The second game at London, big matchup. Both these teams, looking to get the right foot forward to start off their season. Then their only home game until week 6, they have the DC Dragons at home. Again, as we've said a few times, DC, you don't know what it's going to look like yet. You could get a little bit of a tell offensively with maybe film on past experiences for Mullinax, but other than that, you don't know which way this is going to go. And then week 4 and 5, away to Sioux Falls and Florida. Both these teams, perennial powerhouses in the Simulation Football League. And I imagine both of these games are going to be lights out. It doesn't get any easier for them once they get back home, though, as they have to play the Lone Star Glory in the first of their 2 matchups. Lone Star has a very good defense, and they got the running game figured out this past season. I only imagine that they're going to keep moving forward as they have, and they look to be a tough team. And, the Aztecs have to play them twice. Then you get home for Tulsa and St. Louis, both of those teams coming from the East Division, and both teams that, struggle in the past few seasons. St. Louis able to get a little bit of a footing last season and kind of step back again this season at 5-7. Then they go on the road back-to-back South Division matchups where they go to Lone Star for the second time. This one may be a revenge game or vice versa. And then they go to Fort Worth again, a big matchup, a team that we have never played and one I'm excited to. And then to finish off their season, week 11, they are at home against the defending champions. And then week 12 against the Houston Hyenas. And, the South Division is one that I feel is very evenly matched, and that game could come down to who wins the division in the end.
Yeah, I agree with you that the South Division, to me, is one of the most evenly matched. I think that the week 12 matchups in that division are going to be must-watch games. So there you have it. You've got the skinny on all of the teams in the SFL. Now we're going to go to a little bit of a different view. We're going to go with who do we think has the toughest and the easiest schedule. Let's go the toughest. Eddie, who do you think has the toughest schedule overall?
When the divisions were first announced, I looked at it and I said, Cam, come on, fam. How can you put me in the same division with Sioux Falls and Denver? And then I looked over to the East in the Atlantic Division and I saw how those guys are tough, how they messed up. But then once we got a hold of this schedule earlier today, wow, you got a feel for those guys in the South Division. I mean, you got 3 of the teams in the division who all made the playoffs last season, and Fort Worth, who missed it by 1 game. Fort Worth comes into the season playing 5 playoff teams, and Queen City, who's looking to rebound from last season's letdown. They also have a Las Vegas team who has a further progressed running back in Scott Johnson. So Fort Worth, bring your lunch pails because it's going to be a tough season as you got a bunch of teams on your schedule that are going to be no joke to play. We're going to follow up by Houston. Houston made the playoffs last season, Gerald. Just barely. They got in, they won 6 games, made the playoffs. they're going to play 6 playoff teams. And along with those playoff teams, they're going to play LA, who has Tom Raman coaching the offense, Sully coaching the defense. I mean, they're no slouch. I know they are an expansion team, a team transitioning from Chicago, but they are no slouch. They're bringing some players over with them, so they aren't starting from scratch. Houston, you have a problem. Lone Star, they're playing 7 playoff teams and an improved offense in Carolina. They got their offense rolling some way midway through the season. When Harish stepped down, they brought in a new OC, and then they're playing the DC Dragons, who has Stephen Mullinex coaching the offense. We don't know what the team's going to look like yet, but it's going to be tough sledding for Lone Star all season long. Mexico City, they're playing 6 playoff teams, and Charleston, who's looking to return to playoff form after barely missing the playoffs last season. The aforementioned DC with Stephen Mullinex coaching, and they're playing against Tulsa, who don't laugh. Last season, they barely beat Tulsa 24-23, somewhere around mid-season. So they got a lot of tough games. This is a tough division, and whoever gets out of it, I'm telling you, they're going to be exhausted come playoff time. They're going to be beating each other up all season long.
Okay, RG, who do you have as the toughest schedule in the SFL for season 16?
I think when I sit down and look at all of the schedules, the toughest schedule that I believe I'm looking at is the Carolina Skyhawks. The back half of the schedule for them is absolutely brutal. You got to go to Queen City, to Baltimore. You get a little break. You get Portland at home. We don't quite know how well they're going to do this season, but they were getting better as last season came to an end. Then you got to go to Florida, which again, haven't played before, to Los Angeles, the second time they'll be playing them. But you got to think again, this is either going to be a revenge match for them, or them trying to stop LA from getting revenge. Not to mention Rachel Colston and Solly Richardson, both former Carolina players. It's going to be a heated matchup. Even if it's friendly, it's still going to be back-to-back and heated. And then they get Charleston at home. Charleston struggled last season at 5-7, but you got to imagine they're going to rebound. And this is going to be the second time that Carolina plays Charleston. So both teams, they'll have a little bit of film on and a decent chance.
Okay, Tyler, you're up. Who do you think has the toughest schedule in the SFL?
When I was doing prep today, I was looking at all the different teams and how their schedules all interact with each other. And I have to say, Florida scares me. Florida really scares me as far as they just lost Optimus Klein. He has his own team now in San Diego. Ron Cochran has thrown 30 picks in the last 2 seasons. For me, I think Florida has got the toughest schedule. They have the 8th toughest schedule in the entire league, but as far as a playoff team goes, from last year, I think they have the toughest stretch of games, the toughest games in general. It's not looking too promising, in my mind, if you're a Florida fan.
Cameron Irvine, who do you think has the toughest schedule? You made it, so you should know who has the toughest schedule.
Oh man, who's got it rough out there, huh? I'm sure a lot of teams are probably thinking, man, we have it rough out there. I'm going to go on the East Coast, and I'm going to go with the DC Dragons. Look, this team, yes, they're an expansion team, but they have a championship coach, and they have a championship staff, and they have a lot of history in the SFL. And we love our storylines here at the SFL, and that's what made their schedule so hard to put together. Week 2, they go to the stadium named after their former Hall of Fame running back, may he rest in peace, Richard Snowden. At Denver, week 2, you gotta have that on the schedule. Then, week 3, they go to Mexico City. Why? Because they beat then Santa Fe, but still the same franchise, in the Season 5 championship game, and they haven't been back since. So going to Mexico City and the Aztecs trying to slay those demons that they've been dealing with for the last 5 years, thinking about what could have been. That happens in week 3. That is 2 very tough road games, but they also are at Lone Star and at Houston. So given the fact that they also have Baltimore on the schedule because they're in their division, and DC has some storylines to settle, some teams have some demons to settle with them as well. This is a unique schedule for an expansion team, and we're going to see what the DC Dragons are made of. They don't play all the good teams. I saw Chisholm talking in there about hoping that Atlanta played DC. Well, DC has a lot of playoff teams already on their schedule, and it could certainly be murderer's row. We'll see what the Dragons look like throughout the season, but that's a tough draw, and welcome back, Destro.
My team that I think has the toughest schedule, I think, is Sioux Falls, especially in the beginning part of the season. Denver, then you're at Baltimore, then you're hosting Mexico City. You got Lone Star, you got Louisiana, you have Denver. You're one of the teams that are playing 7 playoff teams. 3 of them are on the road, but the road games that they're playing are Denver, Louisiana, and Baltimore. All those 3 playoff teams are on the road. I think with Sioux Falls are having the toughest home schedule along with Louisiana and the number 1 overall schedule. Their opponents have a 56.3 win percentage. So I think Sioux Falls needs to get wins early, or those road playoff games could be a killer, especially with Louisiana in week 9 and Denver in week 11. That's who we think have the hardest schedule. Now let's go to the easiest schedule, and let's go back to Eddie. Who do you think has the easiest cakewalk schedule of the season 16 coming up?
First of all, Gerald, there is no such thing as a cakewalk schedule here in the SFL. I know firsthand. I played 8 playoff teams last season, and I beat a lot of them. However, a lot of our losses came from teams that didn't make the playoffs. So I take no team lightly, and there's no such thing as a cakewalk. However, if you want to ask me which team I think has the weakest schedule, I'm going to go with a fellow friend of mine who dissed me in North Carolina when he didn't meet me halfway for lunch. And I'm going to say the Carolina Skyhawks has the weakest schedule. They only play 4 playoff teams. 2 of them are expansion teams. He plays LA twice, and he also plays a second-year team in Portland. Carolina should be looking at this schedule and smiling themselves, telling upper management and players, guys, it's playoffs or bust at this point, because if we don't make the playoffs, it's going to be a disappointment. As I said earlier, they have an improving offense with Heath McDaniel calling the plays on offense. And if they learn anything from Sully with that defense, their defense should do just enough to get them to the promised land and get them on their playoff berth.
Okay, Robert Garrett Jr., who do you think has the easiest road to the playoffs in season 16?
I think the team that has the easiest schedule coming into this season already has the easiest strength of schedule, actually, and that would be the St. Louis Gladiators. The St. Louis Gladiators, out of 12 games, are playing 7 teams that did not make the playoffs. Yes, they play in a tough division, the East Division, not going to be an easy one to get past with Atlanta and Louisiana, but they got a bone out of this. The team they have to play twice, the Tulsa Desperados, who also struggled last season. And I think that St. Louis should be extremely excited to see the schedule that they have and ready to get the ball rolling.
On deck now, Tyler, what do you got?
Well, for me, I mean, when I was going through, I singled out the Florida Storm of the Atlantic. I'm going to single another team out in the Atlantic, and that's going to be Jacksonville. And here's why. They don't play a single team who had a record at the same level as them. All the teams that they're facing last year have records of either 7 or 5 or below. Those teams are Lone Star, Vancouver twice, and then Florida. This schedule, for me, looks like a cakewalk if there ever was one. Jacksonville should easily, in my opinion, run away with this division and leave everybody else in the Atlantic in the dust.
Commissioner, I'll put you on the spot again. Who do you think has the easiest schedule?
Well, it's interesting that I think Carolina, one panelist said that they had the hardest schedule, and that back half is difficult. And another panelist said that they had the easiest schedule, so Carolina very polarizing tonight. I'm going to go back west. I'm going to go San Diego. You know, before we found out that Javier Vasquez was going over to San Diego to join Optimus Klein, you know, we didn't know what San Diego was going to look like. Now, all of a sudden, San Diego, they're putting some pieces together. That's going to be interesting. And it was brought up earlier, all 4 playoff teams on the schedule, they play at home. Nobody else got that advantage, tip of the cap to a brand new team. Florida at home week 11, Vancouver at home week 10, Jacksonville at home week 3, Denver at home week 8. Now, with that being said, those are not easy teams to play. Denver's got a title, Florida's got a title. But San Diego has an easier than most maybe schedule on the road. They do have to play rival LA, but it's a crapshoot because it's week 1, so neither team knows what they're going to get. So that's a 50-50 ball game. Road games against Carolina and Fort Worth and Charleston and Vegas and Portland. Yes, they have quality pieces and have won some ball games, but none of those teams made the playoffs last year. So if San Diego can exceed expectations, which expectations for expansion teams are always humble, if they can exceed expectations, they have a schedule that possibly could expedite those exceeded expectations further. And that's a look at the Mavericks.
Okay, I have an interesting choice for the easiest one, and I am going, believe it or not, to Vancouver. While they do have Baltimore and Jacksonville twice, they also have Portland in week 3 that struggled. Then they have San Diego in week 9, having LA twice, the revamped Wildcat franchise. St. Louis, I mean, they have some winnable games. I mean, they play 6 playoff teams, and they're split 3 at home and 3 on the road. But I think with Portland being a second-year team, San Diego being an expansion team, and Los Angeles having pieces that we don't know if they are complete yet, I think that's their division to win. So there you have the toughest and easiest schedules. Now, let's go to something a little bit different. Last year, teams that missed the playoffs. Robert Garrett Jr., give me one team that missed the playoffs last year that thinks going to get in.
I mean, I will go away from the homer choice there and not say Fort Worth. I'm actually going to keep with the streak, and what I said was probably the easiest schedule, and go with the St. Louis Gladiators. Go 5-7. They were in that bunch that just barely missed the playoff, and they have a schedule set up. Again, I don't know that they can win the East Division. That's a tough task to do. But there's 6 spots other than the division winners, and if they win the games that they should win and come away with a couple good road victories, I think they're setting sails into the playoffs.
Hey, Tyler, who do you think is going to make the playoffs that didn't make it last year?
I'll tell you what, for an expansion franchise, this team I don't think should be what Cam was saying and being humble. I think San Diego is the last team into the playoffs. Like we had mentioned earlier, the easiest road schedule. They have all the playoff teams at home. I think if they just need to pick and choose their wins at home against those playoff teams and win about half or more of those away games, San Diego is going to be a very surprising team for a lot of people. And now that Javier Vasquez is now at the helm at the offensive coordinator position, things are looking spicy in San Diego.
Eddie Gage, what you got?
Well, first of all, let me, on a side note, I'll say that I'm all on board with what was said about St. Louis making the playoffs. The only problem being they got two powerhouses in Atlanta and Louisiana in their division they have to deal with to get there too. So it's going to make things tough. All that said, come on now. I got to go with my squad, Arizona, on a mission this season. They got a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator over there, Eddie Gage, who's going to make things happen. He spends a lot of days and nights in front of that TV, getting the squad ready. He going to make it happen. I don't care what we got to do. I don't care who can put our division. We going to be there. Second, as I said earlier, Carolina, they got a relatively easy schedule. They got an improved offense. And if they can continue the defense and have it produce maybe 70% of the way it did last season, Carolina will be in the playoffs as well.
All right, Cam, talk to me. Who do you have?
Wow, this is tough. I'm going to take the safe bet. And, of course, obviously I can't say that they're going to be in the playoffs. But I'm going to take the safe bet to say that the team most likely to make the playoffs that didn't last year is Charleston. It was kind of an odd season for Charleston, kind of up and down. They beat some really good teams like Sioux Falls, and then they lost to some teams down at the bottom like Portland. They have Portland again, week 11, but this time it's at home. They get Sioux Falls again in week 3, so we get to see what that looks like again. But no Baltimore for Charleston, no Louisiana for Charleston, no Denver for Charleston. And they also play 4 of their first 6 at home. So if they can get off to a hot start and put last season's issues behind them, then you could see this team make a push. Down the stretch, 3 of their last 4 games, San Diego, Portland, Carolina. So Charleston kind of has an opportunity there to separate themselves late in the season where other teams may be playing tougher schedules. Of course, you never know how these teams are going to shake out. But because they were such a shocker last season to not make the playoffs, we're going to take the safe pick there and say that they'll probably be back.
And my choice, I agree with Robert Garrett Jr. St. Louis Gladiators. You have probably, I shouldn't say that you have the easiest overall schedule. Look, I mean, you have Portland, you have DC, you have London, who Portland and London really struggled last year, to see if they can come back into form. Then you have look at the last 4 games. They have Tulsa twice, who was 3-9. Then Atlanta, that's 500, and then Vegas, that was 4-8. I believe if the St. Louis Gladiators can get back into offensive form, that they can get back into only averaging 16 points a game last year. I think that'll be the key to them getting into the playoffs. Now, let's talk about the teams that made the playoffs last year that you think are going to miss the playoffs. And I'm going to start this one out. And I'm going to say the Atlanta Swarm. The Atlanta Swarm barely made it in last season. I think they had 4 out of 32 scenarios to get into the playoffs, and one of them actually hit. But you're talking about a home strength of schedule that is number 1 in the league, and then the second overall hardest schedule in the league. You look at Atlanta, you have Vancouver home, then you have Louisiana, Jacksonville, Baltimore, Denver, Louisiana for a second time. And the other teams, we talked about Queen City, we talked about St. Louis maybe coming back into form, and Eddie Gage talking about Arizona. So they don't have, I don't think, an easy game on their schedule, and they barely got in last season, as we were talking about Ron Cochran and the interception. So I think that they will not get in. Cam, who do you think?
You are a brave man, thinking that you can upset Chisholm like that. But I get what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It's tough. Another team down there towards the bottom of the playoff picture from last season is Houston, and this really isn't an indictment on Houston necessarily, but more about the division that they're in. A very tough Southern division with Mexico City and Lone Star. Now, the one positive for Houston is that they don't have the toughest schedule in the division. Mexico City and Lone Star do, so one of those could trip up. But this is tough for Houston because they've got games, the first 3 games of their schedule, Jacksonville, Lone Star, Florida, all playoff teams. They also end the year against a playoff team, albeit against a team that they have their number. They have Mexico City's number. So that could have been a worse draw for Houston, but they also have Denver on the schedule and Louisiana on the schedule, 2 of the top 4 teams up there. You add it all up, and if they fail to meet expectations early, they could dig themselves too big of a hole. But if they can manage to win 3 or 4 games on the front half of the schedule, that back half of the schedule, Portland, Fort Worth, London, D.C. is kind of theirs for the taking. So I think their schedule is going to be maybe won and lost early, or I should say playoff chances. But it's a tough draw for Houston, tough division, playing a middle-of-the-pack schedule and trying to return to the playoffs. It's going to be a challenge, and we'll see if they can handle it, but precarious position for the Hyenas right now.
Robert Garrett, who do you think that was in last year that's not going to be in the dance this year?
So the team I don't think is going to make the playoffs this year, I would have to go with the Florida Storm. You know, it was already talked about that they have one of the more difficult schedules, and I think it's going to come down to the wire, but not having Optimus Klein anymore and bringing in the new offensive coordinator, trying to figure out a new scheme and figure all that out. I think that they could struggle early, and then those first 6 games huge. They got the one at home against Jacksonville, at home against Mexico City is not going to be a tough home game either. If they struggle in the first 6, I think it's going to be kind of difficult for them to recover. They got a couple good games for them. Home against St. Louis, home against Carolina there near the end, away at San Diego. You don't know what that team's going to look like, but you know, Florida's either a team that's really going to thrive off of this schedule, or it's going to struggle and probably just miss the playoffs.
Eddie Gage, who you got?
Jared, I had a number of teams, and I've been debating about this for a long time since, you know, we got this schedule. But, man, that's tough. I'm going to go with... I've been going back and forth on this. I'm going to go with, first of all, as I said earlier, one of these 3 teams between Houston, Lone Star, and Mexico City is not going to get in. And it's going to be based off the fact they're going to be beating each other up all season. So one of them is not going to get in. But I also looked at Jacksonville's schedule. The fact that they're playing 7 playoff teams. They're playing inside a division that includes Charleston, who's looking to rebound. Charleston, to piggyback on Cam's point, lost 5 games last season by 1 score or less, including a thriller versus Denver, which came down to Kramer Jackson making, I think it was like a 56-yard game-winning field goal as time expired. So I don't know. I mean, they're also going against a 3-time champion in Florida in their division. It's going to be tough. So one of those 3 teams in the South is not going to make it, and one of those teams in the Atlantic. And my money right now is on Jacksonville, but I also got Florida on my radar too. I mean, them losing Optimus, who was their best receiver, I mean, he was there throughout the entire his entire career, including those 3 championship seasons. You know, Jacksonville and Florida, they're on my radar too, but we have to see how it plays out.
And finally, Tyler, who do you think won't make the playoffs in season 16 that made it in season 15?
Help me. Me. Florida. I think that's the easiest choice for Florida will not make the playoffs this season. Their division is very tough. For Eddie, Cam, to mention Charleston and Carolina on the upswing. Jacksonville's always tough. And as we've now mentioned a couple times, Optimus Klein is no longer there. But for me, it's all going to come down to game planning. Is Florida going to have Ron Cochran throw a whole bunch? And is he going to throw 30-plus interceptions again? I think, in my opinion, they got lucky with a 7-5 record last year. I think they go below 500. I think they're the last team eliminated in season 16.
Okay, well, folks, that's a wrap. I would like to thank Eddie Gage, Robert Garrett Jr., Tyler Falk for joining me tonight and sharing their insights on season 16. I would also like to thank the commission producer, Cameron Irvine, for not only producing tonight's show, but letting me host it for a change. That was an exciting thing. And most importantly, I want to thank you, the SFL community, for watching this schedule release show and letting us into your homes for the last 90 minutes. Keep watching on the Discord channel for news and updates for the upcoming season. Everybody should have got their SFL honors voting ballots. Get them in as soon as you can. We have the second half of the SFL minor league coming up to see who's going to be the next rising star in the SFL, and also get ready for the season 16 draft. We have the honors show, all-star game rosters being announced, the all-star game, and then coming up in January, the 23rd is season 16, week 1. So you have all your SFL knowledge that you want. And with Cam, before we go, can you put up the draft order?
Well, I would, but it was a little tight. The graphic is a little tight, but we do have the draft order to talk about. DC and San Diego will be 1 or 2. That'll be a coin flip later this offseason. Portland is number 3. London is number 4. Tulsa, number 5. Los Angeles, number 6. Las Vegas, number 7. Carolina, 8. St. Louis, 9. Fort Worth, 10. Charleston, 11. Queen City, 12. Arizona, 13. Houston, 14. Atlanta, 15. Lone Star, 16. Florida, 17. Vancouver, 18. Jacksonville, 19. Mexico City is 20th. Louisiana, 21st. Denver, 22nd. Sioux Falls, 23rd. And Baltimore, 24th. That's based off of 4 playoff teams, how they finished in the playoffs. And then for the non-playoff teams, based off of your regular season tiebreakers, the top 5, DC, San Diego, either 1 or 2, followed by Portland, London, Tulsa.
There you have it. On behalf of Tyler Falk, Robert Garrett Jr., Eddie Gage, and the commissioner, Cameron Irvine, I am Gerald Giuseppe, wishing you all a good night and a pleasant tomorrow.